keep track of all his records because he can't remember stuff. So this fan he pays like keeps track of it. He's like, no, that's not the right name. Like points it out. So yeah,
and they're all such unique character names, like in the fantasy world.
Mm-hmm.
Aegon, Jaehaerys, Daenerys,
Holdor,
Rob. So
Rob.
Unique, so fantastical,
and beautiful. So beautiful.
Welcome to Theoretical Nonsense, the Big Bang Theory watch-along podcast. No PhD required.
We're the podcast that recaps all the episodes of The Big Bang Theory. No spoilers.
So hop into your favorite spot,
make yourself a grasshopper,
and enjoy the ride. Hello there, Ryan.
Hello, Rob.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic because we just watched Season 3, Episode 16 of The Big Bang Theory, The Excelsior Acquisition.
Oh, yeah.
For any new listeners out there, I'm Rob, and this is my co-host Ryan. We are Theoretical Nonsense, the podcast that recaps and deep dives facts from The Big Bang Theory, which we call IQ points. As a reminder to everyone, I've seen the series multiple times, but this is Ryan's first time watching, so we do our best to do no spoilers. And Ryan has also been told he's very similar to Sheldon, so we keep a point tally of how close Ryan is to Sheldon.
And right now, that's at 88 points being not like Sheldon, and 93 being like Sheldon. So right now, I am more like Sheldon than not like Sheldon.
Nice. We'll see if you drift even further.
It could be.
Well, a little bit of housekeeping before we dive in. Don't forget to email us at theoreticalnonsensepod@gmail.com. Leave us a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at theoreticalnonsensepod. We actually got a couple emails.
Sure, I can start. I was going to say that we have had a few emails from our friend Rick, and I've emailed him back a little bit, and we had some conversations about Final Fantasy. And he had a comment about one of our previous episodes, and it was specifically the part where Sheldon throws out a whiteboard into the street because he's been up all night. And, I think I was saying he's being all willy-nilly. And basically, I kind of took the stance that it became kind of too joking, too comic, cartoonish almost, because I feel like in real life, people get in trouble for doing that. And if he was like, actually, I guess he was sleep deprived, actually thinking like that's not something a logical person should be doing or even considering because it could hurt somebody. But Rick mentioned that, maybe that's okay because this is a sitcom, and to some extent sitcoms are allowed to be a little bit goofy. And I know that, something like Scrubs, I love Scrubs, and it takes Goofy to the next level. I mean, the first episode that comes to mind is the janitor and Dr. Cox like wall themselves off in a room so nobody can find them, and the only way in and out is through the window, and like it's cartoonish. So sitcoms are allowed to be a little bit funny, and I think that's very understandable. Sometimes I just look for like the more serious aspects. I'm like, I can't buy that. But that's me. I'm curious if you have any takes on that. Do you like your sitcoms to be more serious, or do you like them to be more cartoonish? Let us know, because I'm always open to more thoughts on that. So thank you, Rick, for that. It's a great conversation.
Yeah, I definitely, we definitely pointed it out, and I feel like looking back at Rick's comments, I do feel like we were being a little nitpicky, and I think it was because the episodes before that, like the last few episodes were a little bit more grounded, and then this one just kind of felt like it came out of left field. So that's why we were a little bit, like I said, we kind of pointed it out. We got a little nitpicky, so, but a sitcom is a sitcom at the end of the day.
Yeah. And it's all television. I mean, it's all entertainment. So if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. It's definitely teach their own. So can't be too nitpicky.
And we got another email from fan Michelle, who has emailed us before in the past. She says, Michelle here, your traveling nurse friend. I'm driving from an assignment in Texas to one in Montana. I just finished listening to the Einstein approximation. Great job, y'all. I love hearing these deep dives and your theories on how the writers played the minutia into the episode. Most importantly, I wanted to thank you so much for listening to a note I had sent before about incorporating the vanity cards. They're a really neat addition to the episodes. Great job, guys. I'm a lifelong fan now.
Yay!
I'd like to submit a viewer IQ point in the next couple weeks. What episode should I focus on timing for y'all to be able to include in the podcast? I'm so proud of all the things that you've done for the podcast. Keep up the good work. So thanks, Michelle. We actually, she sent this to us a little while ago, so I sent her a little bit of back and forth, but I guess we are a few weeks ahead. So I would say the general rule of thumb is whenever the episode drops, I'd say probably 2 or 3 episodes ahead. Probably 3 on the safe side if anybody actually wants to submit a request for an IQ point, because that would be great.
It's like, actually, when you hear this, it's probably going to be Christmas time 2025.
We got really far ahead.
Really far ahead.
Yeah, I'm definitely that one of those people that even when I'm ahead, I feel behind. So sorry about that.
It's better to be behead. It's better to be ahead. No, better to be ahead. There we go.
You're still thinking of beheadings from our IQ point on Valentine's Day.
Exactly. Stuck with me a little bit.
Yep. Well, if anyone's interested, a shout out to our previous episode where we broke down Valentine's Day and St. Valentine's and why Valentine's Day is even about love.
Spoiler alert, some heads do roll.
Heads are rolling. Well, that's all I had for housekeeping, unless there was anything else you wanted to mention.
I think that's all I have, too.
All right. Shall we get started on the episode?
Sure.
Should we do some overall thoughts first?
Yeah, overall thoughts. I enjoyed this one. Not necessarily one of my favorites, but a solid episode. And like coming off the back of last week's last episode, it seemed a little lackluster, but it was still good. I'm like, it's just that the last couple episodes I've really liked, and this one, it was good, just wasn't like over the head. How about you?
I really like this one. I love all the storylines revolving around comics. I love comic books. I grew up reading them. The chance to meet Stan Lee would have been like amazing. Like it's fun seeing the fandom of comics, how they're scrolling through all their comics. Which one should I have them sign? Just anything comics related, I love. So I thought this was
Raj's trivia in it, and we'll talk about that. But he has some funny points in it that I thought was a good continual joke.
Oh, I actually have I made a spreadsheet, and
nice.
I will tell you about it later. But also, I always love the return of Stuart. Stuart is a gem, and he's getting sadder and sadder, which is part of his character, but it's just sad to watch, but at the same time, it's so funny.
That's
so great.
I was laughing, but I'm also hoping something positive happens to him. And like, just talking about Scrubs, it reminds me of the lawyer in Scrubs, where he gets sadder and sadder, but he does have like some good stuff happen. In the last couple seasons, he meets what's her name from
Kate Micucci.
Yeah, Micucci. And
one half of Garfunkel Notes.
Yep. Such a great addition to the show too, and like as a couple, like they seem kind of whimsical, but I liked it, and like he deserved it. So maybe Stuart will find something too. I don't know.
Yeah. Let's hope so. No spoilers. Don't spoil anything, anyone. Dun dun dun.
Dun dun. So you want me to dive in?
Let's go for it.
Season 3, Episode 16, The Excelsior Acquisition. This aired March 1st, 2010. And the director, and this is weird, this is the first time, I'm sure we've talked about it, but it's a different director. Peter Chakos, right? Apparently he did 1 episode in Season 2, and he does in the whole series, he does 7 episodes. But he's usually known for being assistants on shows and like we get so used to this not being Sandrowski, right?
I know.
That like I was like, really? Like, am I looking at bad info here? But he's done like a lot of editing stuff. Like I think that's his big thing. But he's produced some shows. He's been additional crew, like way back. Like he helped out on Cheers apparently. So he's been in the industry a long time. But yeah,
Oh, he's done other. Okay, that's why I was like, I always see his name. I always like that name sounds so familiar, and it's because he's done other work on Big Bang Theory. So he does other. He's the editor, so it's
yeah.
edited by. Okay.
And then every now and then, apparently, he directs an episode too. So he has the work song Nano Cluster from season 2, episode 18. He does season 3, episode 16, and episode 23. So we have another one coming up by him that he directs. And then season 4, he does episode 19, season 5, episode 22, season 6, episode 9, and season 7, episode 23. At least according to IMDb. So, I don't know. Maybe Sandrowski went on a break, hiatus, or just disappeared for a little bit. And they're like, hey, you, get over here and direct. And he's like, okay, I can do that.
Honestly, I could see that he needed a break because, like, I've heard, like, it's kind of crazy when you have the same director on the same show. Like, more times than not, it's a different director and they kind of just bounce around. It's because once they're directing filming, they have to be in the editing room.
Yeah.
So then it's like, and so it's kind of like planning that simultaneously. So usually another director will come in and direct the episode while that former director now in the editing room. So then they kind of just bounce back and forth. So it's really crazy that Mark Sandrowski is like just doing so many of them.
Mm-hmm. I'll keep an eye out because I was getting so used to Sandrowski doing them all. Like I've always checked, but like I've always assumed as well. So maybe there's another director in there somewhere, but this is the first one I've noticed. But yeah, so writers Chuck Lorre, Bill Prady, and Steve Holland. And we start off in the comic book store, and Raj enters and apparently has a speaker on his chest, and he has the Imperial March, Darth Vader's theme, going. And he explains to everyone, they seem kind of annoyed with him. But he explains that he wants to show that he's awesome and feared with his entrance music. Howard says there's nothing more frightening than a man with music coming out from between his nipples. And I kind of agree with that. Although I've known people who do entrance music. Have you ever met somebody who does entrance music?
Their own entrance music?
Yeah, they'll find something and saying, like, I'm coming into the party, I need to, like, show off that I'm entering, and they'll play, like, maybe they put it on their phone or, like, on a little handheld boombox. It's fun, and everybody gets people's attention for what it's worth. It's never been Darth Vader's theme, and they've never tried to scare anybody, but, it, like, I don't know, it usually gets applause or something. I don't think I could do it. Like, I do it, and people look at me like I'm weird, but, like, when they do it, like, people clap, like, yay! It's like, wow.
I've only done an entrance, like a spectacle entrance once, and that was for Halloween, for my Halloween costume, was because I paper mache'd the Kool-Aid Man, which I've mentioned before on this podcast.
Yes.
And like the old school commercials where, it was, because it was the old school commercials combined with Family Guy. Because in that there was an episode of Family Guy where people were like, oh no, oh no, oh no. And then the Kool-Aid guy busts through and says, oh yeah. So I had some friends go ahead of me and just scream, oh no, oh no. And I just burst through the door. I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Great costume. Well, I will say that his shirt it was very topical at the time. I remember that it was either before or after that this episode came out. Like that was being blasted like all over the place.
Shirts with speakers?
Yeah. Like that was kind of a thing. I don't remember anyone buying it, but I remember you could buy it.
Was it Bluetooth or was it wired?
It was Bluetooth.
Bluetooth? I don't remember using Bluetooth back then. I guess 2010, it must have been like, I think it came out.
It was
like
kind of on the rise.
Yeah, it's kind of on the rise. And it was a previous iteration, so it wasn't as stable and wasn't as good as it is today. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I could see that. I'm thinking of like the backpack speakers where like they have a plug and you put your like Walkman or something in one of the pockets of the backpack and just push play and it would play. I think I told you I was in Leavenworth. Was in a city visiting one time a few years ago now, and this high school girl, like it looked like a Catholic school outfit or something, was blasting Rammstein out of her backpack. I'm like,
Oh my god.
that it's like not what I would expect. Like we're in this like tourist attraction town that's supposed to be like Bavaria or whatever, and like there's beer, there's horses drawn carriages, and there's this girl walking around with Rammstein. Like weird, but I liked it. I
I
like
think
Rammstein, so.
the old man in me is coming out right now, and I hate that shit. I find it so obnoxious. It's like when people have like that on a hiking trip.
Yeah.
Like when you're hiking and you see another group of people and one of them is just blasting music. It's like, dude, like we're trying to enjoy nature right now.
I didn't come here to
Come
listen to
on.
your music. If I wanted to
Yeah.
listen to music, I'd bring my goddamn speaker.
Yeah, but I don't do that. It's just so obnoxious. It's like, ugh. And that's old man Robert.
Get off my
Sorry.
yard.
Sorry, everyone.
All right, so he's playing music from between his nipples. At least the people on the hikes don't have it coming out of their nipples or anything. Stuart says, or they go and Stuart's there, and Stuart mentions that Stan Lee is coming to do a signing, and Sheldon asks if it's if he's signing because he's done a sequel to his autobiography, and that his last 10 years have probably been full of wonderful stuff. And I don't think this is a full IQ point, so I'll call it a failed IQ point. But I found some interesting information about this, that there are a number of biographies on Stan Lee, but he has two autobiographies, and this confused me for a little bit. He has one called Excelsior, The Amazing Life of Stan Lee. It was published May 7th, 2002, and it's available in hardcover and paperback, and I'm pretty sure it's only available used, that you can't get it new. That's not, it's kind of an older book, and I guess it's not it's not like continually being published. So yeah, that took me aback. That I'm like, if it was that big of a book, I'm surprised I couldn't get it new. And furthermore, I'm surprised I couldn't get an ebook of it or an audiobook. And so that led me into this other book called Amazing, Fantastic, Incredible, A Marvelous Memoir. And it confused me because it's an autobiography by Stan Lee, and it said also by Peter David. And apparently Peter David adapted Excelsior into a graphic memoir. So basically it's Stan Lee's life as a comic book. And this one is
cool.
Available in hardcover, paperbook, ebook, and audiobook, which I'm curious how the audiobook works. If it's a comic book, how are you doing? I'm interested in that. So
It's like old timey radio, little sound effects here and there.
That's what I'm hoping for, like some explosion noises in Stan Lee's life.
Well, actually, side note,
yeah.
on that note, there actually was a style of radio. Well, it was a podcast. It's relevant because it's Marvel, but there was actually 2 seasons of Wolverine where it kind of plays out like an old school theater radio. It's like each season is like 10 episodes or something like that. It's so good. It's so captivating how they have people doing different voices and everything like that to portray the different characters. They have all these sound effects and everything like that. It's so good.
I have this book that I'm reading. I there's this author I love named Paul Tremblay, and he writes horror books. He wrote the book that became M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin, I think. So like people usually know that movie, but not the book. But I love the books. I love that book more than the movie. But he just came out with a new one called Horror Movie, and it's about kind of like a cursed film, and it goes between like a guy trying to get the movie made, to the script of the movie, to like not high school, years ago in the early 90s when they're trying to make the movie independently as kids. And it goes into the screenplay, and the producers have hired a number of actors to do like the voices for each of the characters. And so like in the screenplay, it's like you said, it's almost like dramatized with like, I guess there's not really many sound effects, but there's so many voices going on that it feels almost like a screenplay rather than just an audiobook. And I love when cool stuff like that happens. So um so maybe that's what it's like, but I did notice that this novelized version, the audiobook is about 2 hours long, and the page count was like 190 something pages, which is a little bit shorter than the Excelsior, the original. So I'm thinking the audiobook and actual ebook and paperback versions are a little bit shorter. They don't include everything, I'm guessing, from the original. But also, that one thing I forgot. It might be radio broadcast, but Stan Lee also narrates the audiobook. And so if you're listening to the audiobook version of this, I don't know where it goes, but I did notice Stan Lee narrates it. So again, not a whole lot of information there, but I'm guessing since this version was out in 2015, that's after this episode, Sheldon was talking about Excelsior, The Amazing Life of Stan Lee.
Nice.
So Stewart says that Stan Lee has a dermatologist who happens to be Stewart's uncle, and his uncle asked Stan Lee for a favor, which is why Stan Lee is coming to do the signing. Sheldon didn't want to know this because now he's going to be afraid that he's going to be analyzing Stan Lee's face for contagious skin diseases when he should be focusing on the comic book signing. I think they talk about how Stan Lee's not going to have contagious diseases. He doesn't need to pay attention to that. And Sheldon says, well, look who's Stewart's uncle now, right? So apparently he doesn't believe anybody because they're not actually certified. Raj says he can't believe he's going to meet Stan Lee, and suddenly starts playing I'm So Excited from his shirt speaker and dancing a little bit. That's when Howard says, admits to teaching him those dance moves, which I thought was a nice little touch.
Yeah, I feel like it's a little callback to when they went disco skating.
Right? That's what I was thinking too.
He must have taught him those moves too.
I love that episode where they're dancing. It's like, I was so happy. All right, so we have the intro and we move on to the apartment. And Leonard is trying to figure out what he wants to get autographed. Raj starts playing the Jeopardy timer, and Leonard, I don't know why I put Howard there. Leonard says, Alex, I'm going to go with you're a dumbass. And Raj makes a raspberry sound with his speaker. So he's basically communicating with the speaker through this episode, which is kind of interesting because when Penny comes in later, he continues to do that. And he can't talk out loud because she's in the room, but he can play the sound effects. So he's still kind of communicating. Sheldon says he's going to have Stan Lee sign a Batman comic so that he could be unique. And I love that Raj is like, I'm going to do that too. And Sheldon's like, what part of unique do you not understand, Raj? Howard gets a paper cut.
I actually want to go back to the comics that Leonard mentioned.
Oh, was talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually looked at the values of those.
Ooh.
So I feel like, well, I looked into this because that's what we do. We've looked at other comics values in the past, so I thought I'd carry on that tradition. But I thought about this too. Like, if I was going to get Stan Lee's autograph, I would want my most valuable comic, because then it would just further add more value to it. So Leonard mentions Journey into Mystery 83, which is the first appearance of Thor. I found this on sellmycomicbooks.com. And like we've talked about before, comic books have like a certain grade to them based off like the edition and how many prints there were and everything like that. It's called the CGC grade, which stands for Certified Guarantee Company. And the record sale for Journey into Mystery 83 was a 9.4 condition out of 10, which sold for $432,000.
Wow.
And yeah, so the price grade goes up to 9.4, and it goes all the way down to a 0.5, which is $4,000. So all grades in between are just like in the thousands of dollars. So like a 9.0 is valued at 105,000, an 8.5 at 75,000, an 8.0 at 48,000, and I won't read them all because it's just a bunch of numbers. But like I said, it drops down to 0.5, which is $4,000.
So he's holding a pretty piece of change in his hand, right?
Yeah, assuming that that is graded, which I would imagine it's probably graded.
Yeah.
But then I found another comic site, comic.ha.com, that actually had a different value. It put a 9.2 at 82,000, whereas the first site, sellmycomicbooks.com, put a 9.0 at 105,000. So according to comic.ha.com, it's actually worth a little less, but still quite a bit though. Still in the 5 digits, so it's not too bad. And then for his next option, which was Fantastic Four issue 5, the first appearance of Doctor Doom, I found this on qualitycomics.com. In 2009, low grade of 2.0 would only be worth about $250, but a 6.0 would be worth $1,500. And now in 2024, that 2.0 would be worth $5,700, and the 6.0 grade would be worth $16,000.
Damn.
So back in 2009, he was probably only sitting on like, oh, it's probably worth a couple $100. But if he actually still had it, it's definitely worth a lot more.
Put his kids through college type money. Maybe not that much, but it's close. It's getting there.
Probably not.
Maybe
probably
for
not
a quarter
for that comic
semester.
Book. Yeah. Well, the highest ever recorded sale of Fantastic Four number 5 was graded at 9.2 and sold for $180,000 in September of 2022.
Wow.
So yeah, okay, that one could be called a little money.
So here's a question, or I don't want to interrupt. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I'm done. I got it. That was it.
If you get it signed, would you just have Stan Lee sign it, or would you have him make it out to you? Because I've heard that, I've been getting books signed this past year because Kelsey's really into getting autographs. And if you get it personalized, like, it's really nice for you, but I heard it like hurts the value immensely.
Yeah, because I don't want a book signed for Ryan.
Right? Nobody does. I don't know why. I love
it. This is valueless.
But they all get their names on their comics at the end, and I'm I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I'm just wondering, like, does that deface the value? I think most comic book aficionados probably won't care that much. It's still the fact that Stan Lee's name is on it, and but I don't really know how it works. I'm not like really big on autographs. I just don't really care about them. I've been having fun with Kelsey going around trying to get autographs. And I think it's cool. In fact, that's the big thing is I like meeting the writers and talking to them a little bit. But like autographs like come and go. And I care more about the story being good than like getting somebody's ink on it. But then somebody was like, well, that makes it worth more money. And I'm like, do I care about the money? And they're like, but if they say to Ryan, you just fucked everything up, Ryan. I'm like, oh no. In fact, Kelsey got pissed off because I was getting one of her books signed, and the author's like, do you want me to personalize this? And Kelsey didn't set me up for that. Like, I need all of the layouts of what's going to happen for me to like get the book back.
Execute the plan.
Exactly. Yeah. And so this like put too much power in me. I'm like apparently my eyes like went bold, or like that's how I remember when I'm like, yes. And she's like, who to? I'm like, to Ryan. And Kelsey's like, what the fuck? That was my book. I'm like, I don't know. You should have told me.
I didn't know. I was confused.
It was so much power, and I became obsessed with power.
So her book got signed Ryan.
That's now in the planned agenda for if I get books signed in the future. It's to Kelsey if they ask. Whoopsie daisies.
I don't think the guys are ever going to sell these comics. I think
That's
it's going to be
true.
a cherished heirloom for
Mm.
them. So I think that's why they're okay with it.
They don't even care. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't care about selling their stuff. It's for their collection.
Mm. And just knowing. Okay, so Howard gets a paper cut, and Sheldon says there are band-aids and Neosporin in the desk drawer. And it turns out that they bring up, like, why is it in the desk drawer? Or shouldn't it be, like, in the bathroom? And there apparently are backups in the bathroom all over the place, including his pocket. And this is my first point for being like Sheldon. I don't have band-aids in my pocket, but I do have them in random places around the house. And
I do that too. Like it just makes sense. It's like I don't want to have to like if blood is coming out, it's like you want to address that soon.
exactly. My
Got
favorite
some in
one
the kitchen, got some upstairs. It's like keep some in my backpack. I keep some in my car.
I should have more in my. I have it in my backpack. I don't think I have any in my car though. Probably should.
Better
But
hop on that.
the liquid Band-Aid in my kitchen is probably what gets used the most because I cut myself. I just start pouring liquid Band-Aid on it until it stops. Like,
I've never used liquid Band-Aid. How does that work?
It's basically like super glue, which I've heard some people do just like super glue their wounds shut.
Yeah, just elbow glue.
But
just Elmer's glue.
Yeah, wood glue. It's the same shit.
Aw.
But it's got some sort of like antimicrobial cream in it, or not cream, but agent. So like it cleans it out a little bit too, apparently. But yeah, I used it the other day because I was weeding and I got like a deep paper cut from a blade of grass. Like, how does that even happen? But I'm like weeding with my hands.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm like bleeding. Blood's like all over my hand. I'm looking.
Are you
down,
sure
like,
one of the neighborhood kids just didn't discard a needle?
Ooh, it was in my backyard, and that's where they like to shoot up. So
yeah.
And then I started feeling like I was addicted to heroin a little bit. So
and then I had this weird craving for heroin.
How about that?
It was the darndest thing.
I didn't think of anything of it. You know, that happens sometimes. But now that you mention it. All right, so 1 point for being like Sheldon. Penny enters and Leonard mentions that Stanley is coming to town. And I think this is cute. She pretends like she knows who he is, and he pushes her, and she's like, he's the guy in Star Trek. Star Wars? He's in those kung fu movies you like. And he's like, no, that's Bruce Lee. And she's like, is he Bruce Lee's nerdy brother? Apparently not. Howard then mentions that he has found a bunch of unopened checks in Sheldon's drawer. And when asked about it, I like, why haven't you spent these or cashed them? And Sheldon says, most of the things I want haven't been invented yet. So I'm not sure exactly what he wants to buy with those, but he has plans.
Well, he did mention in a previous episode he's waiting for animanium claws.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Animanium to infuse his bones. So that's one of them.
And Howard says there's thousands of dollars. You should probably put them in the bank. But that's not going to happen because Sheldon doesn't trust banks and believes that ATMs will be the first to uprise during the robot apocalypse, during the robot uprising. So instead, he just keeps his checks in the drawer. And Howard says there's also a letter from the Pasadena court. And Sheldon says it's probably a snide response to his complaints about the flags. And apparently the flags are supposed to be in order from left to right, federal, state, city. And I don't know what order
I looked
they
into
have
this.
them in.
Yeah.
But what was that?
I looked into this.
You did? Go for it.
Yeah,
I was supposed to, but I didn't mark it, so I neglected to.
Well, here's my first IQ point. It is very significant, and because flags are super important to Sheldon, which he just spoke, and you will find out later on.
Yeah.
But I looked into the order of flags and how important is it to keep them in that order. And I found this on federalflags.com and flagsusa.com. So this information pertains to pretty much the United States. So if anybody can tell us what other countries are like, so I know we have some fans in other places in South America and in England. So it's like, yeah, let us know how you guys feel about flags, because I'm going to tell you how America feels about flags.
America.
America.
And our flags.
So there is actually a national flag code, and it is Public Law 94.344 that contains the proper flag etiquette. And there are tons of rules based on the arrangement of flags. Some have left to right poles, and some are more of that triangle shape arranged, kind of like a flying V.
That's kind of what I recall seeing around the most.
Yeah, I see that around a lot in like public buildings, government sites, and everything like that.
Mm.
But in terms of left to right poles, Sheldon is correct. The farthest left is federal, then state, then local. This is a way to put the US flag above all, and the United States flag is supposed to be higher than everything else. And if you're thinking about putting a flag in your yard, you're most likely flying flags on a single pole. So if you're going to be flying a single pole, the US flag needs to be at the very top. And then other national flags can be underneath that. So if you're from a different country and want to sport your flag, then it would still have to go below the US flag. And if you're doing multiple countries, it needs to be in alphabetical order. From there, it would go to state or territory in the order that they entered the Union. And then it doesn't go on further, but I would imagine after that it's city flag or whatever your local territory is. So there's lots of rules to flags.
That's too much for me to really. I don't think I'm going to ever fly any flags now that I know the rules. It's too much stress.
Well, I'm keeping my eyes open. I'm in Pennsylvania, where it's like very there's actually a lot of poles and a lot of flags flying. So I'll kind of have to keep my eyes open for like what order that they're doing it.
What about the order like for different styles of the same flag? So like you get the American flag, then you get like the American traditional flag, you get the like older ones where it has like 49 stars, and then you get ones where it's got like the blue stripe or the rainbow LGBT pride flag. Can you like put those in any order, or is like do you have to have them?
Yeah, I didn't study it that much. That's a very good question. I would imagine from a patriotic standpoint, the American population can be very patriotic. I would imagine that they're fine. Like pure speculation right now, I would imagine that they would still want the traditional US flag on top. Yeah. And then anything else below it.
And the newest
so if you
version
want
of it.
The newest, yeah.
Yeah. Flag makers are going to be in for a killing if Puerto Rico ever gets statehood.
Yeah.
Yes, that's how we make it funny. One more star on there, and
but buying some stocks on flags.
Okay, so Howard says the letter is a summons and that Sheldon ran a red light on November 16th. And it clicks with Sheldon. That's the night he took Penny to the ER. And I love that Penny denies it. She's like, no, it's not. Nope. And it basically comes down to, like, that's a picture of you in the car with me. And she's like, nope, it's not. And apparently Penny got the letter, but she said she wasn't driving and basically threw him under the bus. Penny claims that she can't afford any more points on her license. She already has to buy insurance from a place in the Cayman Islands. And that seems really sketch to me, but it made me laugh. So yeah, apparently, and we know she's not the greatest driver, so that makes sense. Sheldon says he was the only one driving because he was only driving because she was in distress, and this isn't fair. And apparently he only has to go pay a fine, but he's really worked up because it's not fair, it's not justice. And so I kind of looked into this, and I actually had 2 IQ points, but I merged them into one because they didn't really work together. I did this with another one as well. But as far as traffic lights go and what to do with them, I guess the main thing to do is pay your fine. And I think they're kind of banking on that, actually. I think they bank on people getting scared, and they, in the paperwork, they make it sound like everything is so, in fact, anything with bureaucracy, they make it seem like it's steamrolled and that you can't fight the system and that it's A, B, C, D, and you have to follow it because it's already set in stone. But that's not necessarily the case, especially with red light tickets. And I'm not advocating for chaos or anarchy or anything, but what I read was kind of some interesting stuff. And I did try to look mainly into California because each state is a little bit different. But what I did find out is that, like Washington, California, the traffic cameras are typically ran by third parties. And that sometimes, where am I going with this? Just a second, let me process my thoughts. All right, so I found this on trafficschools.com, schoolonline.com, that traffic cameras are usually ran by third parties, and sometimes they're obligated. Oh yeah, this gets weird because since it's a third party and they're being paid for by like the government, sometimes they're like contractually obligated to send tickets, and so sometimes they send more just because they have to get tickets out there, and so you have to pay attention. It's kind of like the whole reason why corporate ran prisons are a problem, that they require the state to fill them up and have so many rooms spent in a corporate prison. And if they aren't, the state gets penalized. And so the state will find reasons to put people in prison for those prisons. And it's kind of messed up. So you do want to double check to make sure that everything's legit. And then I found another, what did I find? What happens is typically the cameras get a pic of your car before you're on the line. And there's like a line where you have to stop if the traffic light is red. And then it gets another pic as you're in the intersection. And so that way it gets a picture of your license plate and a picture of you behind the line, showing that you acknowledge that the right light was red before you passed that line, and then gets another picture of you breaking the law. And the issue here is that the camera will be triggered usually, and there's usually sensors in the road, but it can be triggered if you're in the intersection when the light turns red. But if you weren't completely behind the line when it was red, you usually can have an argument saying it was not red when I entered the intersection. Therefore, I can't come to a complete stop in the intersection.
And you're past the point of no return.
Exactly. And that's what it sounded like to me, that the light was yellow and Penny said, run the yellow light. And he did. So I was kind of, they didn't specify with that. But I would probably say that's his best argument. I'm not sure if the light was yellow when she told him to go and the ticket was sent. But also I've heard that it can be triggered like if you're turning right on red and like you're in a certain position, because camera doesn't know like you're turning right. So they go off all the time and get random pictures. A few other things I found on onlinetrafficschools.com. Sensors in the road take pics when you drive over them. Yeah, I said that. That apparently the fees are usually for running a red light are about $100, or the fine itself is $100, but with all the additional fees and surcharges, you are looking at a ticket between $200 and $500. Some suggestions are that you don't even you don't pay the ticket. Some people suggest that you just ignore it and say that you never got it. Because apparently when a cop gives you the ticket, they are legally able to say that they served you the ticket. When it comes in the mail, they can't prove that you got it, saw it, acknowledged it, and that it didn't get lost in the mail or thrown away or stolen or something. So apparently they have no real way of prosecuting that. And I did find that this website mentioned an article by Dennis Beaver on the Sentinel website newspaper that apparently LA has decided not to prosecute non-payment of red light camera tickets, that it's just not feasible, that they don't have time, money, or the ability to say, yeah, they got this ticket. So a lot of people are just throwing them away. Again, I can't advocate for that. I think I'd be too stressed out that they'd come for me. But I thought that was interesting that people have gone on the record saying, yeah, we can't do this. So they're kind of, I don't know, garbage a little bit. I was also
I
going to
will
say,
say at this point, we are not lawyers. We are not giving law advice. So
absolutely, yeah.
if you get a ticket, we found this information online. So we are
Mm-hmm.
not lawyers.
And you'll probably
So
run
just want to
across
throw
it
that out
before,
there.
yeah, before anything else too. So, do your own research, and I would probably always talk to a lawyer. Yeah, so a real lawyer, not us. But it is interesting that this is like one of the first things that comes up is like, just throw it away. I'm like, what the hell? That's weird advice. What else was I going to say? Also, yeah, traffic cameras are ran by third parties. However, they are usually reviewed by a police officer before being filed. So I was kind of confused because later on, Sheldon mentions that there's no witness on the other end because he's facing a camera. But technically, somebody does look through those pictures and says, no, I can't see the face. No, the license plate is blurred. For what that's worth, I did get a letter in the mail a few years ago, probably 6, 7 years ago, saying I owed money on a toll booth in like Vermont or something. And I'm like, that's really weird because I was in the middle of a class teaching that day. So I don't know how I left my classroom, flew over to Vermont, got on this toll bridge, and then flew back and finished up my class all in the same time. And also, the license plate was blurry. And so it was obvious that somebody just like wrote down the wrong letter or something. But I couldn't contact them. I sent emails and emails, and they ignored me. They sent me another letter saying we are going to start accruing penalties, and legal enforcement is going to contact you, like shit like that, right? And finally, I like filed a grievance with the Better Business Bureau, and they replied to that and dropped everything. I'm like, so you're saying that you just didn't have time to like listen to, well, yeah, so third party corporations handling legal stuff is really messed up. But usually with red lights, they do have a police officer at least filtering some of the images. I was going to say, you can usually pay these online. In fact, even going to court, I noticed that they have made it in many areas where you can like send in your evidence and it's handled like via mail. Like you don't even have to go to the trial. And I think that probably became a bigger thing during COVID because I saw some notes about COVID's interaction. This was before COVID, but still, I thought that was interesting, worth mentioning. And I found a lot of information saying that these are typically easier to fight than if you are pulled over by a cop because you can see all the evidence and you know exactly what's going on if a cop issues it. Police tend to keep stuff secret because they know it gives them a stronger case because they're working with information you don't have. And if you ever read any books about why you need to get a lawyer if you're ever in for questioning, it's obvious cops can and will lie to you if they want to. So it's kind of nice knowing that you have all the information they have and you're able to go to court and say, this is exactly what's happening. But again, if you're really that interested in fighting this, it's recommended to get a lawyer. That it might be cheaper to pay the $500 than, although I guess the license point is where things get interesting because if it's going to threaten your license and revoke it, then you need the lawyer, right? And you need to fight it.
Then it's worth doing it. But a lot of
Exactly.
the in my research, a lot of these camera tickets, traffic tickets, don't ding your will not ding your record and your
Yeah.
license.
What else was I going to say? Oh, according to KCRA, and again, this is this year, March 14th, 2024. So it is way after this episode aired, but I read an article from Sacramento County And I've heard other cities doing this, but again, I was looking in California. Sacramento County has discontinued cameras because they are more expensive than the value they provided via revenue. And some people are complaining that, like, well, the cameras are there to save human lives, and is there a price on human lives? And the police agency is kind of like, maybe not, but we don't have the money like to save human lives. That's just at the end of the day, we can't afford them. And technically, as much as those fines are $500 with the fees and surcharges, apparently they typically don't get the whole amount of those fines. That goes other places. I mean, they're paying for the cameras, they're paying for maintenance, they're paying for the cop to look over the pictures. There's other surcharges. And then it didn't even mention how many people are just throwing them away and ignoring them. So, yeah, at the end of the day, I don't think things are very effective. And I've heard other places like saying, we're getting rid of them because they don't do enough good for what they're costing. With that said, I can also say that there are some notions hand in hand with this and cameras that record your speed and send you automatic tickets. Because I've seen that in a city I'm next to, they put more of those in, more of them. They started putting in speed cams, and people have been talking about like they have the same issues as red light cams. They're really expensive. They can't be upheld. But I don't know. At the end of the day, I would say look over all the information. I really feel like it's weird that we're being monitored by cameras as opposed to real people. And yeah, this stuff gets kind of weird. But anyways, from the sounds of it, I don't know if he has a whole case, but the fact that she said run the yellow light and he said it was yellow, he was probably in the intersection when it was yellow. And that's the IQ point. Actually, I had a little bit more because technically he's on a learner's permit. And I was curious, what would happen if you're on a learner's permit? And part of me was thinking, like, they might, like, if you're on a learner's permit and somebody is 21 in the car driving with you, they might drop that for you. And from what I was looking at, it really depends on the lawyer and the judge. But apparently, the big thing is, according to avvo.com, basically a lawyer website where lawyers are trying to get, it seems like they're trying to advertise. It was a consistency that, yes, it will have impacts on your learner's permit, and it could delay you getting your actual license, especially if you're like 16. It could make it so you can't get it till you're 18. But also, there could be further complications, and you might like lose the privilege to get your license. You could have your learner's permit revoked entirely. So, yeah, he does run some risk that it might not be just points. That because he has a learner's permit, that could be revoked completely, and some other issues. So, yeah. Any other thoughts on that? I think that's all I had to say on that IQ point.
Yeah, I actually did some research on this too. This kind of goes in with what you were saying, but it also goes into the future part of the episode where the judge basically says when Sheldon gives his 3 points, and then the judge says pay the fine.
Yeah.
And then Sheldon gets mad and he says, you're not following the law. He's like, no, I'm following the law. I'm just ignoring you. So I looked into the 3 points that Sheldon made, which kind of coincides with what you just did.
I did some information on that too. So we could bounce ideas off that too now if you want to.
Yeah, we might as well just go into it because this is all just kind of one giant IQ point.
Yeah, I labeled them like 2.0, 2.5, 2.75 IQ points. So definitely, but you can take over from here and I'll add to it.
I looked into who is the responsible party in Sheldon and Penny's situation. Who is really responsible? And I found a law website, hg.org. And the information that they provided is based on official student drivers and instructors, which is basically referring to a driving school, which, according to Sheldon, is the relationship that he had with Penny at that moment, that she was the official teacher and he was the student, because he kept saying that multiple times. So if we move forward with that premise, then the answer is it's all circumstantial. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like what you said earlier. It's really up to the will of the police officer or the judge. The circumstances in the case will determine which party is the at fault party in a lawsuit or insurance claim. In some cases, more than one of these parties is considered at fault, while in other cases, only one is found liable. So, when can the student driver be held responsible? Student drivers are going to make mistakes, but if they're being truly careless or negligent, they could be held liable. Students, even while learning, have a legal obligation to drive safely and with reasonable care. One place where this can get tricky is with the question of insurance. Teen drivers that are not yet licensed typically do not have their own car insurance. However, they will be covered under the policy their parent or guardian has. And then, when can the instructor be held responsible? The driving instructor may also be held accountable for the accident. The instructor's responsibility is to keep his or her eyes on the road and guide the student into safe driving behavior. Instructors also have a way to intervene in an emergency, so they are required to take reasonable steps to prevent an accident. If they do not, injured drivers are able to bring claims against them. So this kind of insinuates that there are official student drivers where they're using the driving school car where the teacher can actually push on the brakes.
Mm-hmm.
So consider this scenario. In an accident caused when a student driver runs a stop sign and collides with another vehicle, the instructor should have used the car's extra brakes to stop the vehicle. If the driver was taking a moment to check his phone and failed to see the risk, he was negligent in performing this duty. Because he did not uphold his duty, he is liable. In this instant, the driver could also be held liable. So, with all that in mind, Sheldon is still technically at fault. Even though
Mm-hmm.
Penny was the instructor, which we're very loose with that term, he still has an obligation to uphold the law. And even though Penny told him to just floor the gas, run the red light, just go, he had an obligation as the driver to acknowledge that that's illegal. I'm not
Yeah.
doing that.
And it says the situation of where the light was at, if it was red or if they had been yellow for a little bit. He was in the driver's seat, literally.
Yeah. And now we have emergency situations because Sheldon really pushed that it was an emergency situation, which she dislocated her shoulder. And according to the law offices of Thomas Carroll Blauvelt LLC, it says that laws don't change in an emergency situation. The law is the law. The officer that pulls you over may have some leniency, but case by case, they may not. So in this case, yeah, she does have a dislocated shoulder, but that's something that technically could wait. It's not like it was a gunshot wound and she was bleeding out or something like that. And then the final one, which we kind of touched on, the Sixth Amendment, where the camera isn't a real person. But then again, that's debatable because there is a person reviewing this information. But for anybody that's interested in the American Constitution, the Sixth Amendment states, "In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witness in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense." Which pretty much means that the accused has the right to a fair trial, they have a right to a lawyer, and they have the right to approach their accuser. Face their accuser. That's what I mean.
And to find witnesses.
Yes. And you kind of already touched on this, but to, I guess, validate it even more, according to eline.com, sorry, according to elinelaw.com, in the state of California, camera traffic lights have been deemed constitutional, though there is a huge debate over it. It didn't say when this law was passed, but if you're in California and get caught on camera, you're kind of SOL. Like they deemed it constitutional, so they're at will to just take your money.
And technically, in this country, driving is a privilege. It's not a right, which means that if any legal body decides you're at fault, and you've agreed to just take blame for whatever the cause might be. It's really hard to fight stuff when it comes to, especially like the DMV. Like if they say like we're taking your license, like that's usually the end of the day. They've decided and it's done. So with points or whatever it might be, it's just part of it.
Yeah. And like I said before, generally these violations do not affect your insurance. So he would have been better off just paying the fine.
I think so. Although he mentions at the end that he got dinged a few points on his driver's license. But again, I don't know if learner's permits get dinged like that or if these actually ding. I know so little about the point system that, like, I didn't grow up. I don't think I grew up driving where there was a point system. So maybe there was. I just never dealt with it. But
yeah.
Oh well.
But that's it. That's one very long IQ point.
And I have a few things to add to that too that I wanted to point out. One with the Sixth Amendment, it was weird because for some reason I was thinking all I know the Sixth Amendment for was the right to an attorney. And reading the full thing, I thought it was interesting that because there's quite a bit of information in that and what you're have a right to with this swift and speedy trial to your peers, so on and so on. But I've been reading interrogation books and how I don't know, it's my current obsession, I guess, is how police interrogations and questioning should probably be completely illegal. That when they say anything can and will be used against you, even before they say that, they can and will use anything against you, and the courts will believe them because they are the cop. So yeah, everything I'm reading says that you don't want to remain silent because silence is, and according to some of the books, that this got strengthened quite a bit during the Obama administration, that they basically handed cops a lot more power than they had before. But there's some information to contradict that too. But anyways, if you remain silent, it can be used as admission to guilt. And so they're like, oh, he just doesn't want to talk because he did it. Same thing if you use your Fifth Amendment, which is the right to not the
right to remain silent.
The right to remain silent and not use information that will be used against you. And the cops, police, and the legal system can use that and say he chose to use the Fifth Amendment because he's guilty, which is weird because it was written so you wouldn't find yourself guilty, but now it's being used against you. So the only thing you can actually do in any case that you are being questioned, and before you answer any questions, the books were basically saying answering what you're doing there and why you're there are basically the main things you can answer, saying like, I was running to get a candy bar or something, and there was an accident. That's fair, but anything more, like get a lawyer and say specifically, exercise my Sixth Amendment, I want a lawyer. I want a lawyer. I want a lawyer. And if you say that again and again very clearly, because apparently there have been legal cases where people have been prosecuted and their words were basically like, oh, I was told that I should get a lawyer. And the cop said, no, he was saying he was told he should get a lawyer. He wasn't asking for one, so we didn't give him one. And he was found guilty.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, so really, really big. I'm getting off topic on this a little bit, but if you're ever in a situation, always exercise Sixth Amendment and ask for that lawyer right away. But again, if it's a $500 speeding ticket or a red light ticket, it's probably going to be cheaper than just just big
Yeah,
money.
especially knowing that it doesn't actually ding your insurance.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like just pay it, especially if you know you're wrong.
And I was going to add a little bit more too to the that which is necessary is legal, where he's trying to make the argument that and I could see why he was making this argument that she was in a medical distress, she needed to get to the hospital, but the big reason this is not legal is because ambulances are set up to deal with that and to get you to the hospital. So the question is, if she was in medical distress, why wasn't she in an ambulance? And therefore his argument falls apart completely. And
Mm-hmm.
if it was something where they're out in the wilderness and there's no cell reception, so they're running stop signs, then the judge will probably consider that on a case-by-case scenario, because it doesn't come up that often and it really needs to be discussed in person in court, right? But again, it doesn't come up, and that wasn't their situation. So yeah, he's kind of at fault here.
Yeah.
So yeah, good long IQ point. I'd say that's
There.
at least 2.
We're gonna count that as a twosie.
Double whammy. Okay, so he's blaming Penny, and Penny apologizes and says she'll reimburse him as soon as she gets a part in a movie. So she doesn't have the money to pay for this quite yet, but she does feel bad. Sheldon says he'll have his day in court. Howard says he's going to end up in jail. And Leonard mentions that this court date is the same day Stan Lee is coming to town. And then Sheldon mentions that he's going to miss Stan Lee as well. Or that everyone's going to miss Stan Lee.
Look what you've done. Because of you, we're all going to miss Stan Lee.
And they all have the same thought, like, yeah, we're not missing Stan Lee. You're on your own. But Sheldon calls his only witness Penny, so she's going to have to go with him. Unfortunately. So now we're at Penny's apartment, and Sheldon knocks. I did like this rendition where he goes, Penny, knock, 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 Penny. And she answers the door and goes, Penny? And it kind of broke him. He goes, no, that's just wrong. So I did like his response to that. Sheldon comes in with a script for her to run in court, and they start practicing it. And basically, it's setting her up to be like a stereotypical country hick, where she's got an accent and saying weird things, and basically build Sheldon up to be a superhero of sorts, and that she is just so happy to have the privilege of knowing him, and that when she says that, she's actually supposed to cry a little bit, or like clear her throat and like get emotional. And so she runs through it and actually starts acting. And when she does that, he recommends that maybe she should put her sweatpants on again so the judge can pay attention to her buttocks. From
the juicy
message. So they are in court, and Sheldon is representing himself, which also I thought was weird, because I think he is smart enough that if he cared that much, he would try to get a lawyer. That if it's not about the money, it's about right and wrong. Unless, maybe lawyers all turned him down because he's in the wrong. But the only reason I know people who represent themselves is because they don't want to pay money for the lawyer. But in this case, he has plenty of money and he's got time, so it seems like he could probably put a lawyer together. But he doesn't. He's representing himself. This is where he makes the 3-point stand like a chair. What does he say?
Like a milk stool.
Milk stool. That's what I'm looking for. I'm like, milk chair. I remember milk stool specifically. And then
before you die, I was going to say before a shout out to the judge. His name is Judge J. Kirby, which is a call out to Marvel writer Jack Kirby.
Oh, I missed that.
Yep. And the judge is played by Steve Paymer, who actually does have a very small acting resume. But he's done roles in Mad About You, Will and Grace, and Everybody Hates Chris.
We're going to bring up Kirby later, so I'm glad you mentioned that. I completely missed that. His name is Kirby. So
yeah, Judge J. Kirby.
Judge J. Kirby. Nice. So the judge says Yeah, we kind of talked about this already, that he's not ignoring the law, he's ignoring Sheldon. And Sheldon mentions the judge is basically the head of the kiddie table of the justice system. And that doesn't go over well. And the judge says, I'm going to give you a second to apologize, or you're going to be found in contempt of the court. And the next scene is he's in a jail cell. And he has the audacity to tell a guy on a bench to move over. That's his spot. And that's the
Guest star alerts. I'll just dive into that right now.
yeah.
The inmate sitting in Sheldon's spot is played by Calvin Tenner. If you're an Office fan, which I will ask for an update from you because you're watching it for the very first time, but he was in The Office as one of the warehouse crew, Glenn. And then a little, since we're talking guest stars, we might as well talk
Yeah.
about the future guest star, which is the guard, played by Marcus Fulmer, who's had a very long acting resume, but all very small parts. I remember him from How I Met Your Mother. He did a very small role as like a delivery driver during a Christmas episode. And he's also been in Everybody Hates Chris, Scrubs, Parks and Rec, and Community.
Oh. I didn't recognize him, but I know what delivery driver you're talking about and How I Met Your
Yeah, it
Mother.
was When Lily Stole Christmas.
Yes.
Marshall went to find the present for Lily, and he had to like partner up with the driver to like deliver all the presents.
Yeah.
Yep, that was him.
I love those episodes. I love Christmas episodes.
Me too.
So, yeah, some guest roles. And now we are at the comic book store. They are standing in line waiting for Stan Lee. And Raj is going to ask Stan Lee why he gives his characters names with alliteration, where all the first names and last names begin with the same letter. And this starts kind of a continual joke where he mentions Bruce Banner, Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Stephen Strange, Octavius, Silver Surfer, Peter Parker, and worst of all, J. Jonah Jameson Jr. And I did an IQ point where I kind of looked up all these and found a little bit of information. So I'm just going to go through them now because he mentions more later, but I figure handle them all at the same time. For this first section, I think these are pretty straight giveaways, pretty common ones. Bruce Banner is the Hulk. Reed Richards is Mr. Fantastic. Sue Storm is his love interest, Invisible Woman. Steve Strange is Doctor Strange. Octo Octavius is Doc Ock, Dr. Octopus from Spider-Man. Silver Surfer is the Silver Surfer, we know that. Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and J. Jameson Jr. is the newspaper editor-in-chief of Daily Bugle in the Spider-Man comics storyline. The next round, he says Dum Dum Dugan, Green Goblin, Matt Murdock, Pepper Potts, Victor Von Doom, and worst of all, Millie the Model. Dum Dum Dugan is... this one I didn't know, but apparently he's an officer in S.H.I.E.L.D., and he's on Nick Fury's team, and apparently he's known for wearing bowler hats. So if you see somebody on the S.H.I.E.L.D. team as a marksman and he's wearing a bowler hat, it's probably Dum Dum Dugan. Green Goblin is in the Spider-Man universe. He's one of the main villains, but technically he has alter egos because it's like a gas that hits their brain weird and turns them into the Green Goblin. But he's mostly known as Norman Osborn and Norman Osborn's son, Harry Osborn. Those are the two main Green Goblin characters. There's technically a whole bunch of goblins. There's several people who play Green Goblin. Then there's the Hobgoblin. Then there's like also Demogoblin. So the list goes on, but those are the two main Green Goblins. Matt Murdock is Daredevil, who gets mentioned later as well, because Daredevil is Dare D and Devil D, so two D's in there. Pepper Potts, I knew this, but I had to look it up for it to be reminded. Technically, her name is Virginia Pepper Potts, and she is the support for Iron Man and the love interest for Tony Stark. So she's played by...
Gwyneth Paltrow in the movies.
Yes, I just forgot her name. Gwyneth Paltrow, thank you, in the movies. Victor Von Doom is Doctor Doom, the arch enemy of the Fantastic Four. And worst of all, Millie the Model. I had to look this up, and I was kind of confused why he came up with this, because this is not Stan Lee's work. Technically, this is created by Ruth Atkinson. Um, Millie the model is the character Millie Collins, who is, it's a story about her as an inspiring model. Technically, it's Marvel's longest running humor title, and it ran between 1945 to 1973. But technically, it wasn't always under Marvel. Like, it's been under different names. So yeah, Stan Lee didn't create it. It wasn't always under Marvel, but it does have the two M's in there. And apparently, the art was affiliated with Archie in some way, and there's some information about occasional crossovers where Millie the model hooks up with Archie, or they go on drives. I didn't read them. I just saw pictures. And the third batch of people that he mentions that have these alliterative names, Fantastic Four, which is the team with Mr. Invisible and Invisible Woman, or Mr. Fantastic Invisible Woman, I'm sorry. Daredevil, who was Matt Murdock, as mentioned earlier. Invincible Iron Man is Tony Stark. Happy Hogan, who is Tony Stark's assistant. His name is technically Harold Joseph Hogan. He's a supporting character for Tony Stark, who also hangs out with Peter Parker quite a bit in the most recent Spider-Mans. And apparently, according to Wikipedia, he got his name because he used to box, and when he boxed, he never smiled. So Happy Hogan is, the nickname. Kirk Connors is the lizard from the Spider-Man series. And worst of all, Fin Fang Foom is an extraterrestrial creation that looks like a dragon. And he debuted in Strange Tales in 1961. And apparently his name was inspired by a movie rendition of a musical called Chu Chin Cho, which Stan Lee saw as a kid. And then I wanted to finish this off after explaining all those, that why does he do this? According to Screen Rant, Stan Lee has came forward and said that he does this because he needs help remembering characters' names. That helps him stick out in his head. So technically there is a reason, and it's that it makes them more memorable. And I would double down on that alliteration is typically used in poetry and in writing to really call attention to words. Like, it can sound pretty, but like, you don't want to overdo it, because if you do it once in a while, it sticks out and people remember, like, oh, that sounded strange. I'm going to remember that, like, subconsciously. So I would say not only did it work with Stan Lee, it probably works with readers quite a bit too. That it makes the characters more approachable and more understandable. So yeah. Do you have anything else for characters? Did I cover them all?
I do.
Ooh,
I wanted to know how many characters in the Marvel Universe have alliterative names.
Ooh.
So I thought that there might just be a comprehensive list on Google to just look at, but there wasn't. I was a little shocked that there wasn't a full list of all the alliterative characters in Marvel or any other comic book series. Every list only had like a partial list where it would kind of do like the main highlights, like Bruce Banner, Daredevil, Green Goblin, things like that. But I could tell that it wasn't like a full list.
Millie the model probably wasn't on there.
Well, I went to Marvel.com and I ran a search for every character.
Damn.
So
this is deep dive.
So I'm not going to name every character so according to Marvel.com, if you look at the main page and look at all the characters, I put them all in a spreadsheet and I counted them, and it was 1,247 characters. And 81 of them were alliterative. So I actually scrolled through and I highlighted all the alliterative names, and I found 81 of them. However, sadly, this is not the most comprehensive list either, because not all superhero names had their real identities attached to the name. So, for example, the list had Cyclops on there, and Cyclops is Scott Summers.
Yeah.
But Scott Summers was not on the list. It was just, he was just named as Cyclops. And some of the names that were on that list were superhero groups, like the Fantastic Four was on
Yeah.
that list. So it's kind of like, okay, so there's more likely more than 81 of them. So in terms of groups and characters. But
And
if
these
we
are
were to, oh, sorry.
sorry. I was just gonna say this is Marvel, not just Stan Lee's creations, right? It's like
This
all
is
of
just Marvel. So it would take way too long to scroll through every character because you have to like it isn't just like a full list, it's links. So then you have to click
yeah.
on the link, read through it, then go back, then go to the next character. It's like, yeah, I don't have that kind of time.
Who's got that kind of time?
But
Raj
if you
does.
want to do the you probably would.
Poor Raj.
But if you want to be nerdy and mathematic about this, 81 out of 1,247 characters, rounding up, is 6.5%. So 6.5% of all Marvel characters have alliterative names.
So
But
that's
like I
actually not
said,
that bad.
it's really not that many. And but like I said, even Marvel.com wasn't giving both names.
Yeah.
Like Cyclops didn't say Scott Summers. So it's like, well, that's technical. Well, I counted them in the 81, but chances are there's going to be a lot more because they're within 1,000 characters. I didn't even know most of them
Mm-hmm. And that's a
because,
question too,
granted,
is how many
yeah,
of
it's
the
like,
popular ones are
yeah, and how many of them were actually created by Stan Lee and how recent are they?
yeah.
Like, how many, like, tons of characters got added after 2010.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like Raj didn't even know that they existed at that point. But yeah, I took the time to make the spreadsheet, scroll through it, and count them all.
You gonna post it so people can see?
I don't know if I could get it all just in one.
In one spreadsheet? I meant like on our
in one screen, or like just add it to the IQ point list.
yeah, I was thinking our link tree or something. The tree
Yeah.
Rob made, or the spreadsheet Rob made.
All right, I'll tidy it up and I'll add it. It'll take some tidying up, but
I trust your opinion. If it doesn't belong there, it doesn't. But we want to see it. Show us the info.
Yep.
Nice.
Well, that's what I had.
Nice. Howard cuts in line, and he apparently doesn't want Raj to go first because he knows that Raj is going to piss off Stan Lee. And then Penny calls and mentions that Sheldon is in jail. Apparently, Howard wins because he called it. She says he's going to spend the night in jail because if he doesn't apologize before 5. Leonard says that's terrible, but the line starts moving and they all run inside. So he's like, Sheldon will figure himself out. Cut to jail. Sheldon is inside and he calls the jailer over and says that he wants to use the restroom. The jailer points to the toilet in the corner and says, there you go. Sheldon says he's ready to apologize once he understands that that's your toilet and you're going to have to go in front of everybody else. So apparently he apologizes. And we're in the apartment. I love this scene. Leonard and Howard are admiring their autographs, and it says to my friends, Stan Lee, Excelsior, like amazing autographs. Raj only says to Raj, Stan Lee. I get 1 point for being like Raj here.
You piss off celebrities?
Just my face pisses them off. I manage.
Oh, there's got to be a story. You can't count this and not tell a story. Story time.
Anything specific. In fact, if I thought about it more, I'm sure I could think of something more in line. All right. So a couple months ago, I had the great pleasure of meeting the R.L. Stine, right? And I'm with Kelsey, and we've flown out to Tucson for this. And Kelsey's in front of me, and she goes up and just like makes conversation with him. And I'd have to check her book, which says something like "Great to meet you, R.L. Stine." But he's like, "Wow, this is a cool cover. Where'd you come from?" All that shit. And I go up. I'm like, "Hi." He's like, hi. And signs my book. R.L. Stein gives it back to me. I'm like, what the fuck did I do?
Didn't even ask for your name.
Yeah,
You
I
just
didn't
like
ask. Like it was I don't know, just my face. So like that's one case, and I know it's happened many times. It happened at the recent book
Well,
signing I went to.
are you just saying that R.L. Stein's a perv and he just gave Kelsey more attention?
Hey, I'd put out for R.L. Stein. I can't blame him. He defined our childhoods. Well, he's our childhood hero. So, anyways, yeah, I feel like Raj a little bit there. Although, he had it coming for asking the question. I could see me doing that too. Saying something where like, why the fuck did you say that, Ryan? I don't know. I thought it was a good question.
To know why.
Why alliteration? And what's weird is that there apparently is a reason. It's to help Stan Lee remember characters. So he wasn't too wrong.
It's understandable because, like, I'm sure you as a writer have like written some characters or written some backstories, and like the story just cycles like far and wide and everything like that. You almost need like something, a way to like remember everything.
That's what I believe is R.R. Martin, right? Song of Fire and Ice, that he has hired a fan.
George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, to keep track of all his records because he can't remember stuff. So this fan he pays like keeps track of it. He's like, no, that's not the right name. Like points it out. So
and they're all such unique character names, like in the fantasy world.
Mm-hmm.
Aegon, Jaehaerys, Daenerys,
Holdor.
Rob. So
Rob.
Unique, so fantastical,
and beautiful. So beautiful.
It is kind of funny, like it is kind of funny, like it's Rob Stark with 2 B's. First time I've ever seen that, and 50% of the time I get an email from someone at work. They spell my name with 2 B's. It's like the weirdest thing. It's like I even sign my name Rob, R-O-B. But they emailed me 2 B's.
My big thing now is I've gotten in the habit of always spelling out my name. Like when somebody's writing or typing or something, and they're like, "What's your name?" I'm like, Ryan, Ryan. And I've had people
because otherwise they'll think you're Brian.
Exactly. Every time I don't do it, they're like B-R-I. I'm like, no, Ryan. And every time I spell it out, they're like, I can spell, sir. I'm like, why? I just can't.
I thought your name was Byron. Sorry.
Byron. So Howard says Raj must have pissed him off about the characters' names. Sheldon walks in and he has been found guilty and fined $533. And I kind of wonder if maybe he got fined something for contempt of court too, because like I said, the max seemed to be like surcharge and fees $500. That's like right borderline, like where that seems like it might be too much, especially in 2010 when 500 is the maximum now. But who knows? Maybe that's it seems like ifs, ands, and buts can come up to any of this. So Penny says she'll write him a check as long as he puts it in the drawer with the other checks he doesn't cash. He also mentions that he has 3 points on his driver's license that he doesn't possess. And he also had to issue an apology because he wouldn't urinate in front of criminals. So he's had a bad day. Howard says he also didn't get to meet Stan Lee. Leonard says that's enough. Sheldon had to stay in prison all afternoon, especially in that suit. Apparently they're making fun of his suit attire as well. Howard points out that Stan Lee also ended up taking them all out for gelato, and that they were told to call him Stan from now on, except Raj. And I just find it funny that Raj keeps getting pointed out and having problems with Stan Lee. I put an LL there. Sheldon blames Penny for all of this, for missing Stan Lee and now having a criminal record. And he gives her the moving finger. And I didn't follow that completely, but he gives kind of an epic speech and then puts up a finger and moves. And she thinks that he might be giving her the finger, but it's established it's just the moving finger. Back at the comic book store, Penny enters, and I think this is great. She feels bad, and so she has gone to Stuart to ask for help to make it up to Sheldon. And she asks Stuart what what his plans are, what he's doing later that evening, and he mentions that he's going to be sharing a can of tuna with a cat. It's not even his cat. In fact, the cat may not show up. Just, it's so sad,
Sad
and
Stuart.
random. Poor Stuart.
That's an alliterative name in the comics. Sad Stuart.
Sad Stuart. Um, Penny asks if he has Stanley's number, and she wants to make it up to Sheldon and try to get them to meet. And apparently Stuart doesn't have a number, but he has the address. He can't give it to her, but as she's walking out, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, this made me laugh too. She goes, "Why did you let me know you have his address if you can't give it to me?" And he's like, making chit chat. You have to realize, I'm could be stood up by a stray cat tonight, so he has nothing. Like he's just trying to make conversation and not be lonely.
I'm craving contact with anybody or anything.
And so he says, "Let's make a deal," and asks if she'll be his date to a wedding. And he goes, "The cousin getting married is usually the one I go to weddings with." So like, he's the last one standing, and really sad. And she asks if she can bring Leonard, and he goes, "Yeah, sure. We'll say he's your cousin." I love that because it's like so innocent. He just doesn't want to go alone, and he's fine with her bringing Leonard. Just doesn't want to be alone. So we're getting to the end, but Penny and Sheldon show up at Stanley's house, and Sheldon is just bewildered by the whole experience. So we're walking up Stanley's driveway. We're ringing his doorbell. We're going to go in and get milk and cookies with Stan Lee. So he's kind of in his own world. That's not going to happen. Stan Lee does come out, and we have Stan Lee's guest starring. He seems disgruntled from the start. And Penny explains the situation, but Stanley just gets irritated, saying these fanboys always seem to feel like they can come up uninvited. And he mentions that he's like, "Well, why don't you just come on in and watch what did he say, Lakers game?"
Lakers game.
Yeah. Is that basketball? I'm so bad at this.
Yes.
He goes, "Why don't you come on in and watch Lakers with me?" And Sheldon goes, "Okay," and comes on in. And Penny mentions Sheldon doesn't understand sarcasm. And Stanley says, "I wonder if he'll understand this," and tells somebody to call for the cops. And that's basically the scene. Penny runs away very quickly, but I had a question here because I'm curious what people think. Do you think Stan Lee is nice, or do you think his legendary status has whitewashed his character over time? Because I always think like, oh, he's starred in the Spider-Man movies. Like he's always a guest star in his movies. He seems really energetic and supportive, but I also hear some like negative things. And this comes up with the Jack Kirby reference. That one big thing was I read in an interview, and Jack Kirby was a co-creator / creator of many, many Marvel icons, Fantastic Four, for instance. In an interview in 2011, he did an interview with Gary Groth on thecomicsjournal.com. And he kind of made it seem like Stan Lee's not very nice. He actually calls him a pest and said that he likes to go around and irk people, basically poke their buttons for fun. I guess that's not necessarily a bad person, but ornery. And Kirby made it sound like he couldn't really stand Stan Lee's presence because of that. It reminded me almost of, did you ever hear about Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey and Batman?
No.
Tommy Lee Jones hates Jim Carrey, and he hated him through Batman Forever? Through the setting. And apparently Jim Carrey like went up to him at a restaurant, and Tommy Lee Jones got pissed up and stood up and said something like, "I can't stand you. I can't stand anything you do or what you're all about. Leave," or something like that. And Jim Carrey was like, obviously like hurt. Like I feel like he puts on a happy face most of the time, but he's also like, the more I learn about him, he's really sensitive. So that seems...
He takes method acting to like the extreme.
Yeah.
Like I read like a snippet of an article that basically says like he like and when he dives into a character, he goes deep.
Mm-hmm. And he's a great actor. I mean, he does the humorous roles, but if you ever see Eternal Sunshine of the
Eternal
Spotless
Sunshine,
Mind, uh,
yes, one of the greatest movies of all time.
it absolutely is, and he shows his acting chops. Like he doesn't have to be the goofy guy all the time. He's just a sad guy going through a breakup. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's a freaking fantastic movie. Um, so, anyways, that was one not so far, and I also what got me thinking about this was Todd McFarlane, because Todd McFarlane worked for Marvel, and I believe he was credited for like creating Venom, basically. And I've probably talked about this, that Venom, if you compare Venom to Spawn, like they're basically the same character, just one is
One's
Spider-Man.
a demon and one's a demon and one's an alien.
Yeah, and the suit is like liquid intelligence, so on and so on. But Todd McFarlane started McFarlane Studios because he wanted to give creators a publisher or a way to create their work without giving the rights to corporations like Marvel and DC. And I was like, maybe he has something to say about this. But I found an interview with him where he basically said, you can't blame Stan Lee for this issue with the corporate side of business. Stan Lee's not necessarily a good guy or bad guy, but he's a cog in the system who has become an ambassador of Marvel. And you have to remember, he's not like the CEO, he's not like the president of the company, he's the ambassador, he's like the face on it. And like we mentioned earlier, Kirby created most of these icons as well. Millie the model like wasn't even created by Stan Lee and gets mentioned here. But he's being linked to them all. And apparently, Todd McFarlane mentions that it might be because Stan Lee seems to have outlived many of the other creators. And so since he outlived them, he's like gotten all the spotlight centered on him, or did get all the spotlight centered on him. And he doesn't think, McFarlane says he doesn't think Stan Lee acted out of malice in any of these occasions. It was really the business side of the company, the non-creators, creatives taking advantage of the creatives. So I'm curious what people think. There are a lot of bad things about said about Marvel and how they've taken advantage of artists and creators. And I think that's a good way to put it. What McFarlane said, that Stan Lee's not necessarily bad or part of that. He's just the ambassador and got his face put on it. So if anybody wants to say something, email us, give us your thoughts. If you've met him, tell us your story. I'm curious, what was it like? Were you a Raj or were you a Howard and Leonard? Did you get gelato or did you get arrested? I don't know.
Did you get a nice personalized autograph, or was it very standard?
Was it Excelsior, or did you have to call him Stan Lee while everybody else called him Stan? All right, so we're back at the.
I could definitely see the parallels of that industry with like the movie studios and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, it's about making money. It's a business. They're trying to like. But it does suck that these artists are getting screwed over. But at the same time, it's kind of like me. Like, I'm a chef that works for a large enterprise. So any recipe that I write, it belongs to them. And that's just kind of the way it goes, because I couldn't have created these recipes without the resources that they've offered.
Yeah.
So technically it does belong to them.
And it's weird because it reminds me of Thomas Edison. Edison gets high acclaim for like all these inventions and shit. And from my knowledge, he didn't do shit. Even like electricity, it was really Tesla, right? Who came up with a lot of stuff about electricity, and Edison like was kind of on the back burner. And Edison tried to prove Tesla wrong by killing an elephant. Did you hear about that?
I have heard about that.
Some fun stuff there. And then like Edison's company basically would do creations, and Edison would take the credit for them because it was under his company. And I don't think that's entirely fair. I think that's really fucked up. I mean, I guess that's how capitalism works in corporations, but if the system is to deny the intelligent creators their just their accolades, their promotion, and gives it all to the top of the company. I don't think that's ethically or morally right.
Well, if, like, look at Windows. I mean, how often is Bill Gates coding?
Yeah.
Yet somehow but he gets all the glory. He hires people,
In fact,
some lemmings, and they code, and he gets all the credit.
even that, if you like backtrack it, like most of Windows comes from his taking the idea from Macintosh, and Macintosh gets put on. Everybody thinks Steve Jobs came up with Apple computers. It was Steve Wozniak, and they're like, "Who's Steve Wozniak?" I'm like, "Exactly, fucking lootly."
Thank you for proving my point.
Prove my point. Except like when you get into like some really nerdy stuff, like I believe there's a cartoon called Code Monkeys, and Wozniak like guest starred on it, and like call him like the Woz, and like nerds will know who Steve Wozniak is, but the rest of the world doesn't really know as much. But at the same time, I guess creators usually don't care that much about the limelight so much. Maybe not always, but from what I've read about Wozniak, it really seemed like he was as happy as creating the whole Apple corporation as he was quitting that job and teaching kids. Like he just loved working with computers. It wasn't about fame or fortune. So maybe that goes on. But anyways, yeah, I'm curious what people have to say. All right, so we are back at the apartment and we're wrapping up. Raj is going on about superheroes with the same names again. Howard says just to let it go. Sheldon comes in and he's happy. He saw Stan Lee's house. He now has a restraining order that's signed, and he gets to hang out again with Stan Lee at the hearing. And he says that the restraining order is going to look great next to Leonard Nimoy's restraining order, and that's then. So he's happy again, and Penny is a great friend. She's probably one of the best friends a person could have, right? I don't think any of my friends would go that far out of their way to make up something for me. Like we're gonna get into legal trouble with Stan Lee because you miss him. Like that's just shit. It's life. But she's great. Okay, so we are on the vanity card. Lori Productions number 279. This says this also is partially why I brought in that question. Is Stan Lee a good guy or not so nice of a guy?
I have not read this, so I'm very interested.
I'm glad I read it beforehand because it like sparked that question even more. I worked for Stan Lee 25 years ago at Marvel Animation in LA. My favorite memory is sitting in his office with the legendary Johnny Carson writer Bob Smith. We were discussing an animated series featuring Rodney Dangerfield as a dog that got no respect. Bob was the actual brains behind the project. I was just hanging around hoping to be included. Anyway, the meeting was going along nicely. The idea of creating an unloved mutt modeled on Rodney seemed both poignant and hilarious. Then Stan rose from the throne-like seat behind his desk and said, "What this project needs is a real comedy writer." I looked over at Bob, one of the widest guys you've ever seen, and watched him get even wider. I glanced down at and saw his fists curl into bloodless mallets. A cold, eerie silence filled the room. It felt as if time had stopped. I remember thinking I'm about to see a legendary Johnny Carson writer kill the guy who invented Spider-Man. And then the oddest thing happened. Bob smiled and said, "Yeah, Stan, that's what it needs, a real comedy writer." Stan was happy to be agreed with. The clock started ticking again. The atmosphere returned to normal. Bob and I left the office. Stan never had a clue. When I told him the story on the set of The Big Bang Theory, he jokingly said, "So, you're still not a real comedy writer." We both laughed. It was funny, but I'm still gonna sick Bob Smith on his wrinkled old ass.
Excelsior.
And I have to wonder, is that Stan Lee being that pest where he just likes to poke people's buttons, or was he I don't know. but it was
I don't
obvious
know.
Bob Smith seemed angry.
It seems ego-driven.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like Stan was again, speculation. It does
Speculation.
seem like Stan was definitely the face of Marvel, so he probably felt that his opinion was more valuable. So he just always wanted to throw his 2 cents in.
Yeah. And he probably had more power than them, so he's like, what I say goes. So, sometimes movie executives do that. They have the power, so they're like, I just like this particular movie more, even though there's no reason to like it or any reason to speculate that it's a better idea.
Yeah.
So the moral of this episode is always get a lawyer. Don't trust us and don't trust random websites online. Get a lawyer.
Facts.
Okay.
All right, let's count some points.
Okay. All right, I am at. It went 1 up on both sides. Nothing huge this episode. 89 to 94. 89 not like Sheldon. 94 like Sheldon.
All right, 4 IQ points because we just had one very long-winded one.
Yeah. It was a good one though. Like it just had a lot of tentacles to go down. That's not the word.
Nope.
Wow, what am I thinking? Rabbit holes, many rabbit holes. And the rabbit holes had tentacles. It was a weird IQ point.
The tentacle opened up into a rabbit hole.
It said, come on in, boys. I enjoyed the episode. It wasn't my favorite, but it was a fun one nonetheless. I'm happy with episodes like this.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Again, don't forget to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Theoretical Nonsense Pod. Email us at theoreticalnonsensepod@gmail.com. Don't forget to leave us a review. Smash that like button if you're on YouTube. And we will see you next time when we talk Season 3, Episode 17, The Precious Fragmentation. This was Theoretical Nonsense, the Big Bang Theory watch-along podcast. No PhD required. Our intro and outro music is by Alex Grohl. Thanks for listening. Oh, you're going to love this one.
Oh boy.